Okay, it's Nick here. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, what have I done? I've got one of the most poorly lit setups in the world ever, and it's basically just so I can just draw you a picture showing you a bit more about me. I'm trying to do this whilst I'm working, so if a call comes in I'm going to have to stop, but never mind. Okay, now let me explain it to you like this. Alright, we got a couple of circles here. There's that circle there, and then there's that circle there. Alright, so between these two circles, this one here we're going to call religion, okay? And this one here we're going to call spiritual experience. You can see how crap my writing is, okay? Now, between these two, this is something which I regard as being something which is out there. I mean, planet Pluto, that existed long before people discovered it, okay? There's things which exist in the universe which have existed long before people have discovered them. And that's essentially what I'm interested in. That covers, you know, the fun things I've had before, such as the astral projections, the spiritual healing, okay, things I've experienced, sharing dreams, okay, telepathic moments, right. Then of course there's the, you know, angel experiences, ghost experiences, Ouija boards, seances, you know, all the other fun things, all the things I've done playing with the various different toys and pendulums and all the other, you know, there's that. As well as heaven knows what else is going on in here. Now, reality is that we have to use something which is irrational, which comes from here, okay, in order to try and achieve something which is there. Now, I'm kind of like inhabiting this section here, okay, part of the overlap between religion and spiritual experience. I'm aware that all the stuff that I've experienced, which I can just like, oops, highlight there, roughly speaking, you know, the stuff I've experienced is only like a tiny part of all that there is to know. And one doesn't have total knowledge of that. There's always going to be big questions. So I'm just drawing a question mark there to show you that there's more and more questions to be asked. Hypothetically, within this area of spiritual experience, there's something which points to, you know, the ultimate question, the ultimate, you know, major arcana thing, the ultimate, you know, the causal factor behind the universe, the hypothetically God or whatever you want to call it. It's somehow in there. But all the stuff here is different to all the stuff here. Now, within religion, you've got like traditions, you've got folklore, you got theologies, you got all kinds of stuff there going on in religion and forms of, you know, spirituality in action. We'll just write that there as well if I can fit that in. In action. Now, I'm not saying any of that, all that stuff is unimportant by any stretch of the imagination. All of that stuff has got lots and lots of personal importances to lots and lots of people. And, you know, it's perfectly okay to take a slither of the pie, you know, at some point in your life when you require it, of any form and any type whatsoever, and to make that yours, and then that will help you out with, you know, a temporary state of identity. You know, it could be something which brings about mental peace. Maybe even gives you a community. Okay? Maybe from that you can then pick up extra things such as tips on how to live better and so on and so forth. But that's fun, that's useful, that's interesting. And some of this stuff in this section over here points to something of the stuff which is over here. But there is a problem. And the problem, quite simply, is like what is all of this stuff, and what of this stuff really does connect with this. Now, I haven't drawn this circle to overlap this circle for a good reason, because a lot of the stuff here is, all of the stuff here is made up. All right, every single thing in the whole wide world, every single religion in the whole wide world is made up. Now, that's not a bad thing, because making things up is the way in which humans find ways of communicating ideas to other people. Alright, but all of this stuff is artificial, and from all of this we get all of the confusion and the complexity of this tradition is better than that tradition, and I prefer this god as opposed to that god. It's all it's where all the complexities come. Alright, and that side of things is not my primary interest. Now, I personally have my own personal slice of the spirituality and action pie, which I personally do, which personally is okay for me and kind of like makes me feel relatively content. But I also know full well that that's just another thing which is just essentially, made up. It has been created by people for the purposes of explaining something, as well as to gather a group of people together of a certain type and like mind for the purposes of hopefully doing some good in the form of social interaction. And so that's beneficial. Alright, the aspects of the pie for me, it does bring me a certain level of peace of mind. And so on and so forth. But there is a problem here. Another problem. And that is when it comes to asking questions. Now, part of my goal, my life, my mission, my whatever, is to try and understand this section here, which I've called the Circle of Spiritual Experience. Diddly-diddly-dee. This is just my way of looking at it, okay? So my interest is in that, okay? It's less interested in that. Alright, so I'm not going to be worried about all the stuff which goes on here and worrying whether I've got like the true slice of the pie or whether the slice of the pie I've got has got the right varieties of traditions and folklore and theology and all the rest of that, because I do not regard any of that as being all that important. Okay, I am someone who asks questions, which I spelled badly. There we go. Asks questions. And because I'm someone who asks questions, I'm someone who is not really welcome in lots of these other slices of the pie. It's just like I'm not welcome there. I'm not welcome there. I want to, I'm not welcome there. I ask questions, and I don't have a singular sense of identity when it comes to traditions or folklore or theology or matters of that type. So because I ask questions, my focus is therefore more on attempting to intellectually and experientially deal with this side of things. Alright? And because I ask questions, I'm going to end up saying something which is going to challenge people over here. Whether they're Christian, whether they're pagan, whatever. I'm someone who essentially asks questions of all of these things, and therefore I'm in a certain particular position. And I will be hated by lots of people from all the various different parts of this, that, and the other, because I would say that there's lots of different questions one should ask of all of these things. And I have to admit, in humility, that what I'm looking at here, and all the stuff I've experienced, which comes under this section over here, is essentially just a rock pool of the entire ocean. Yeah, I've had a few other moments when I've kind of delved in deeper, and I've ended up having a really weird experience here, there, and everywhere. But those things were few and far between. It's not like, there's some hard and fast skill which you actually need in order to try and get there. So what do I therefore do? I try and incorporate the irrational combined with an understanding of what I call the 4 meditations, which I think is essentially part of the process of developing yourself so you can periodically delve deeper into the ocean. And again, I would continue to ask questions about what I have experienced. I do not develop into a divine believer or a singular believer of any particular type. Right? So because I'm asking questions and I'm not, stating I've got all the answers, I therefore have to choose an identity which is number one, culturally separate. Number two, speaks of a questioning nature. Whoops. Yep, my handwriting really is appalling. And number three, suggests hypothetical, experiential, spirituality. Alright, that title, which I have chosen to adopt, is Deist, Transcendental Deist. So that might make sense to you. Now, my objections, because I am one of these people who ask questions, just write down objections here on this lousy manual PowerPoint I'm doing, is number one, statements of facts which are dubious. Because if something is a statement of fact, we should be able to put it to the test conclusively and to be able to prove that it is a fact. Alright? Hard promises. Alright? Such as okay. Bad use of descriptive language. Number four. Unethical explanations. Such as now, there is a reason for this, and that is predominantly because we're in a world where there is a pandemic of false hope. So statements of fact, such as, you know, I can do a spell and it can curse you, or something like that. Wrong. Hard promises of it works, because there's people who are desperate who need help. So you can't say it works if you don't generate a result which is specific, time-bound, measurable, reliable, and repeatable, which I've mentioned many times, but I'll try and write it down again before my battery dies. Time-bound, measurable. Anyway, you get the picture. Reliable and repeatable. Okay? I'm not welcome in certain aspects of the pagan community because I ask questions. And the questions I ask is because I want to enhance this part of my being. And I want to do so with a certain degree of clarity and hopefully reliability at some point. Okay? I want to move in that general direction. But because I ask questions, you know, the pagan community would find me a very difficult person to deal with. And there are aspects of the explanation of a spiritual nature from the pagan community and the Christian community as well, which I would struggle with deeply. Okay? So I'm separate from all the various different religions in the world, but I can use ideas from all of them. I'm asking questions, I'm exploring spiritual experience, and I'm looking for answers through experience. And so that's essentially where I'm coming from. Now, this shows that I'm going to be a bit different to you, and if that's a problem, then, you know, I have to just turn around to you and say, sorry. Because I look at things from this point of view. Alright? Transcendental deism enables me to ask questions, whereas if I'd chosen to be a pagan and I'd have to say it works all the time, I would not be happy, because I think that the phrase it works can only be used aesthetically. You know, a ceremony is aesthetically pleasing to you. A theology is aesthetically working for you. A prayerful practice is aesthetically beneficial for you. Alright, but I think the word aesthetically, I probably spelled it wrong there, so don't worry about that. You can say something works aesthetically for yourself, your personal spirituality. It works aesthetically. But if you just use the phrase it works associated with something spiritual or religious, I objectively regard that as evil, because it does too much harm. Alright, and I think I can say that not only on the basis of direct personal experience, but just through observation. You know, this is a phrase which causes a lot of harm in lots of different ways. And the other thing I prefer is for people to define their terms when they're communicating. Especially if you're going to use the word it, and you don't define specifically what you mean by it. And if you're going to say something works, you've got to define specifically to me what the hell you mean by that. Okay? If it works, then tell me precisely what it is and precisely what works mean. Because if it doesn't mean specific, time-bound, and measurable, reliable, and repeatable, it doesn't mean it works. This is essentially a brief picture of where Nick Dutch is coming from as a spiritual stroke, religious stroke, occultic stroke, magical stroke, quasi-Christo-pagan fuck up, whatever you want to call me. Or just call me a transcendental deist, because that's more accurate. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.